Hello and welcome to the Beckoning Bookshelf. I'm your host, Jeffrey Ashcraft. I am a big Studio Ghibli fan. I love Studio Ghibli movies, especially works by Hayao Miyazaki. So when The Boy and the Heron was released in the US in 2023, I had to go see it. And of course I loved it. It's fantastic. Great music, great story, great art. It's a Hayao Miyazaki film. There's no way it's going to be bad. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, I will say that it is one of the more obscure Ghibli films, so keep that in mind. But in the movie, the protagonist reads a book, and this book has a profound effect on him. And the book plays a critical role to the story because it acts as a turning point for the protagonist. But for such a critical book, the movie gives us very little information about it. It only gives us the title. We don't know anything about what the book is about or why it affects the protagonist so deeply. Well, me being a fan of books, I want to know. I want to read it. I want to know why, what was in there that affected the protagonist so much. And, I mean, it must have been a good book, right? Well, luckily for me, the book actually exists. And I can actually read it. Now, if you've seen part one, you know where I'm going with this. The book the protagonist reads is titled How Do You Live and was written by Yoshino in 1937 Japan. Now, to be clear, The Boy and the Heron is not a direct adaptation of How Do You Live. I mean, the book itself is in the movie, so it's more Miyazaki's own way of exploring the themes and questions that Yoshino presents to the reader in this book. So, it's Miyazaki's own way of asking, how do you live? Essentially. Now, for those who haven't seen the movie, what's the movie about? Let me give a brief synopsis, but I'm going to tailor it somewhat to focus on the book. Just so you know. Well, the movie follows a young man named Mahito, who lives in Japan in the early 1940s, and who tragically loses his mother in a hospital fire. Sometime afterwards, his father marries his mother's sister, so Mahito's aunt, and they move to her rural estate. Now, if you're thinking, wait, his father married his dead wife's sister? That's a little weird. Yeah. It's a little weird, but the movie handles it well. So, moving on. Sadly and understandably, Mahito is rather cold and distant to his new surroundings and his new stepmother, Natsuko. So much so that he just kind of allows her to just stroll into the woods all by herself and doesn't do anything to stop her or really anything. Not long after that, Mahito finds a book that his mother intended to give him. That's How Do You Live? After reading that book, he decides to go after his stepmother to bring her home and goes to the sealed tower where his granduncle disappeared many years prior. So, that's what the movie is about. Now, you'll notice I didn't say anything about a heron. You know, the boy and the heron. Yeah, so like I said, the synopsis was a little bit tailored to focus on the book. And you can see how the book played such a critical role in the movie. Because prior to reading the book, Mahito he's miserable. He's soulless. Life has no purpose, meaning, or joy for him anymore. It's just now something to endure at best. He's so miserable, in fact, that he actually intentionally injures himself with a rock. And gives himself a pretty severe injury, too. Now, when he sees his stepmother, Natsuko, going into the woods, it's not that he hates her or anything, it's just he doesn't care. There's really nothing to care about for him anymore. Like I said, he is purposeless and soulless. He's miserable. But after he reads the book, he suddenly decides, okay, let's go get my stepmother back. So the book has a profound effect on him, and that's what I want to talk about. I want to surmise as to why. What affected Mahito so much in this book? Now, this is all me talking at this point, because since the movie doesn't give us anything about the book, essentially, it allows us the freedom to surmise and guess as to why it affected Mahito so much. So these are all just my own guesses here. And I have 3 guesses primarily as to what affected Mahito so much. First off, I'm pretty sure that he connected greatly with Copper, the protagonist of How Do You Live, of the book. I mean, they're both young men in Japan around similar ages. So he probably related just to that in that way. Sometimes speaking is hard, but to relate it to myself, when I was growing up, this is totally going to age me, by the way. When I was growing up, I would watch the original Power Rangers, like the first Power Rangers, and I would relate more to Billy, because he had glasses. He was the Blue Ranger. He had glasses, and he was not as physically talented as the other Rangers. Just like me. I wore glasses, and I was not as physically talented as the other kids. So I related a lot to him. So similar to how Mahito may have related to Copper. But not just in the fact that they were both young men around the same age, which could be that Mahito's mother intended to give him this book when he reached Copper's age, as a teenager, as a young man. But I think that Mahito also greatly connected with Copper through their misery. In the book, Copper becomes miserable at one point. So miserable, in fact, that he allows himself to get really sick. Similar to how Mahito injures himself with a rock. Now, the sources of their misery are different. For Copper, his misery comes from something he regrets. For Mahito, it comes from the loss of his mother. But the depth of their misery, what they're experiencing, is very similar. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mahito found a strong connection there. So that could be the first thing, is that he really connected with the book. Second, the book talks about the importance and existence of human interconnection. So again, to give a brief recap, Yoshino wrote this book in 1937, and I have now read it. So I have a connection with Yoshino now. But not just with Yoshino through this book. I have connections with everyone who made this book. The people who made the cover, the people who bound it, the people who did the type. I have connections with all them through this book. So Mahito may realize that he has connections with his lost mother through his new stepmother. I mean, yes, Mahito did lose his mother, but Natsuko also lost her sister. And he may realize that he can have more connection with his mother through his new stepmother, through her sister. And that may be one of the things that gets him to start caring again, to get him to start taking some action, is realizing that that connectivity that people have with each other just inherently. Further, he may also realize that his mother wouldn't want him to be cold and distant to her sister. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Mahito saw this book as his mother telling him the story. In the book, Copper's uncle writes to Copper. He writes his ideas. He teaches Copper lessons through his journal. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if Mahito views this book as something being written by his mother, like his mother telling him these things. Similar to how Copper's uncle is telling him, Mahito's mother is telling Mahito. So he probably may have realized that his mother wouldn't want him to be essentially mean and, well, careless toward her sister. Third, and the last one, is Mahito. There's a lot of protagonists going around. Mahito probably realizes, well, he wants to start exploring the idea of how to become a great person. So the book really talks about, well, it discusses and examines what makes a truly great person. And Mahito probably takes this to heart. Now, does he fully comprehend it when he finishes the book? No, he doesn't. And that's one of the things I like about how the story is told and how Mahito reacts, is his misery isn't all gone. He's not all better. He's not now this joyous, optimistic kid running around. No, he is still struggling with the loss of his mother and trying to figure out how to move on, but now he has a purpose. Now he has something to work towards. Now he has something to figure out. Life has meaning again. And so I think that might be the other thing that greatly affects him and pushes him to take action into finding Natsuko, is he wants to try to figure out how he could be a good person, how he could be a great person. And I think that was one of Miyazaki's goals with this story, is both to encourage us to explore that same concept, how to be a great person, but also to explore the concept for himself. I think both of these, both Miyazaki and Yoshino, they're both asking the reader and the viewer the question, how do you live? They're inviting us to do some self-reflection, to look at our lives and see what in the world we're doing with them. Who are we? How do we live? And I think it's a good question to ask. So that is all I have for you today. Have you watched The Boy and the Heron? Did you enjoy it if you did? And what Studio Ghibli films do you really enjoy? And lastly, what do you think of the concept of how do you live? What do you think of that question? I think it's very interesting. How would you explore it? Where would you look for the answer? What would you possibly answer? No need to share all of that because that can get very, very personal, but I encourage you to look at it. I encourage you to explore those ideas just as Yoshino and Miyazaki have. Thank you for being here. Thank you always for being here. You are amazing. Now go find yourself a good book.